All right, everybody. Hey, I believe we are live, and thanks so much for joining me today. I've kind of been a little bit AWOL in terms of making videos, especially videos about teaching. It's not that I don't have anything new to teach. My goodness, I have so much that I've been stockpiling over these past couple of years. But with everything that's been going on with COVID-19 here and abroad, it's been affecting our work in the nation of Liberia, and we've just been really kind of going full tilt there, helping them get food so they can keep quarantine and stay safe. And we're so thankful for all the response that we've gotten from everybody, and happy to report that the people we're working with are safe and sound. So really, really thankful for that. But over probably the past 2 years, I've been toying with the idea of writing a new book. And in the last year, I kind of got a little more serious about it. And then when COVID-19 hit and the quarantine, was given, and all church services had to be canceled and gatherings, and so all my preaching appointments, they've all been canceled, and there's nothing really for the foreseeable future. And I began to just kind of, try and make better use of my time. I have so much time on my hands, and we complain about, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And I was complaining so much before all this that I never have time just to sit down and focus on writing my new book. And what's the excuse now? There is no excuse. So I have been working and researching for the last 2 years. The last year I got a little more serious with, really trying to set a date for myself to have it done by. And now with this newfound time, I've just been kind of really going for it. I'm going to be honest, you don't feel like writing every single day in quarantine. Yeah, your ups and you have your downs. And so while I'm not ready to even give the title of the new book yet, because I'm 90% sure that I like the title that I have in my mind, but I don't want to announce that just in case, we end up changing or the publisher has a different idea. And I'm not even sure on the medium that I'm going to use to get it out there. So we'll kind of see how that all plays out over the next 6 to 8 months. But I just thought that in the meantime that I could maybe give you a little snippet, a little insight into some of the things that I've been learning, and what the new book is about. I think I could safely say that it's part two to Understanding Jesus. So in 2011, Understanding Jesus came out, and it's done really well, and it's sold a lot of copies worldwide. And I've heard so many good things from people about how it's really helped them to understand the teachings and life of Jesus. And we really kind of did a big focus on the feasts of the Lord, and how they related to the life of Jesus and how they relate to us, the church. And the feedback over the years has been really, really great, and so that's been encouraging. And so I've been wanting to write this follow-up book for a long time, because when I wrote that back, I probably wrote it in 2008, and then it was released in 2011. So between 11 to now, that's 9 years, and you just don't stay stuck in what you learned in the past. I've always been learning. I've continued researching. I've continued to ask the questions. Hey, why is that there? Or I got a sense that there's something more, to this. And so I've been doing that all these years, and I've been compiling and compiling. And I'm going to be honest with you, the way my brain works, it kind of just goes bleh. It goes all over the place. I'm not super systematic. That's why my amazing wife has been so helpful to me, because she's able to say, hey, Joe, hang on a second, let's go A, B, C, and D. I want to go from A to Z, but she's teaching me how to navigate through the creative process, because I'll get an idea and I just want to jump on it. And so I want to be very systematic in the way I approach this new book. And what I decided to do was to use the Gospel of Luke as kind of the backbone and as the outline for the new book, because I have all these Hebraic insights that I've learned over the years as I've continued to work with my friends in archaeology, the Israeli government, my tour guide friends, my secular Jewish friends, my Messianic Jewish friends, and just learning from them. And I just have all this information, and then I lay it all out, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how do I tell it? I jump from here to there to here to there, and it's kind of all over the place, and there's no rhyme or reason for why I'm talking about this after I'm talking about that. So I thought, Luke is probably It's my favorite gospel in the sense that I love the orderly account that he gives, and he even says that right in the opening of his book. I decided to put together an orderly account, but because what makes Luke really unique is that he's a Gentile, and so he observes things that the other writers, it's not that they don't observe it. Matthew, Mark, and John don't include some things in their gospels because remember, as Jews writing to Jews, the audience already knew, so they didn't even include that in their accounts because it was just understood by the culture and by the background. And because Luke is writing to an outsider, to somebody who presumably doesn't live in Israel, is presumably not even Jewish themselves, he decides to include things that he knows will help strengthen the account and the case that Jesus is the Messiah. So I started reading through the Gospel of Luke. In fact, before all this quarantine stuff, I was flying a lot between um, Southeast Asia and then between Africa and back. And I had a lot of times in Europe, I'd have these 10, 12, 15-hour flights. And so I would just put on the Gospel of Luke in my headsets, and listen just to the audio of it and go through Luke and go through Luke. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I know something cool about that verse. And I would make a little note. Then I listened again. Oh, yeah, I know something cool about that verse. Oh, yeah, I remember when I learned this. And then it hit me. I'm like, hang on a second. Luke is the perfect backbone for this new book, for all this new teaching. So this new book that I'm working on will start in Luke 1 and go all the way to the end. And it just a chronology. It just follows the life of Jesus. And as I'm going through it, we'll kind of branch off into different Hebraic and Jewish background teachings that'll strengthen the core of this Gospel of Luke. And so I thought, well, I'm just in the initial stages of writing. In fact, I'm still researching. I'm gathering. I'm about 3/4 of the way through the research stage, which is the most fun part of the book, but it can be the most challenging, getting all your sources together and confirming things that you think might be and looking for 1, 2, and even 3 sources if possible, trying to make sure that what you're saying is actually true. And if it's new, that's great. And so, I've been doing all this research. And so what I thought I would do is I would share just maybe one little thing with you that I've been learning along the way that I thought was really cool. And I'm just going to open up my little note here. So you'll see me looking off to the side. And actually, let me show you in Luke chapter 2. Let me go to the screen. Again, I'm new at all this is Zoom stuff, so you have to forgive me as I just kind of cue this up here. So let's go into Luke chapter 2 in verse 42. And I've been using the ESV, the English Standard Version. It's probably the most academic version, not just because it's newer, but it's got so much scholarly discipline put into this translation of the Bible. And so I've been told by those who are higher in academics saying the ESV really is the best word for word translation that you can get. So let me just give you this little example that we find in Luke 2:42. And it's the story of when Jesus comes to the temple with his family. And it says there, and when he was 12 years old, they went up according to the custom. Very, very simple. And then the story goes on a little bit more in Luke. Is this it here? Yeah, in Luke 2:46 and 47. Well, let's just kind of read this whole section here, starting at verse 41. It says, now when his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of Passover. So we'll talk about why he went every year during Passover. Well, let's just say it now. There was 3 pilgrim feasts. So I have them here in the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verses 14 and 17. 3 times a year, everyone was required to go to the temple, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. So the story is telling us that during the Feast of Pentecost, the first pilgrim or commanded feast that you were to go to Jerusalem, his parents went every year because they were good, observant Jewish members of society. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to the custom. So well, okay, let's keep reading a bit. And when the feast was ended and they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, and his parents didn't know, supposing him to be in the group that went a day's journey. But then they began to search for him among the relatives, and acquaintances didn't find him and returned to Jerusalem searching for him. And after 3 days, they found him where? In the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And this is where it gets interesting. And all who heard him, who? The teachers and the Pharisees, the Sadducees, whoever were gathered, the people, the vendors, whoever happened to be in the temple, they were all listening to him. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So here he is at 12 years old, and he's in the temple teaching. So why does Luke, first of all, he's the only one who even records the story, which I find interesting. But why does he give us the age of 12? Why doesn't it just say when he was a young child, or as a teenager he went, or as a young adult? Why does Luke give us specifics? Luke is really, really good at this. And that's why I love using him as the core for the outline for this new book, because he's so brilliant. It's beautiful the way he records the miracles and the events in the life of Jesus, and he kind of sets it up earlier in his gospel, and then later he confirms what he said that Jesus was going to do, or the Messiah would do. It's really, really beautiful. And so Luke has this way of capturing things, and he talks about Jesus going to the temple, and he was 12 years old. In fact, he's the only one who mentions it. So the age 12 is actually mentioned in some historic Jewish documents in something called the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is a collection of teachings and traditions, oral traditions of rabbis from antiquity, and they were passed on from generation to generation. And so that they wouldn't be lost, they were compiled. And this started in around 536 BC, and it goes to, and it finishes in around 70 CE, just before the destruction of the temple. So this collection of writing and tradition that's compiled and gathered takes place right smack during the life of Jesus. So we know that the people of his time would have been aware already of some of the Mishnaic, these teachings found in the Mishnah. And so the number 12, or the age 12, is actually written about specifically in the Mishnah. And I found it really interesting, and it helped me to understand, oh, that's why Luke mentions he was 12. So the Mishnah doesn't just say something about, the age 12, but something that happens to a 12-year-old boy according to the customs of the time. And it's really, really interesting. You can look this up if you want a little bit later. In the Mishnah chapter called Niddah 5:6, Book 5, Chapter 6 of Niddah, Niddah. This is what it says that happens to a 12-year-old boy. Very, very interesting that the Jewish audience would have totally understood when Luke said, and Jesus was at the temple at 12 years old. Oh, 12, okay. They would have known what was going on in his life. But you and I, way over on the other side of the world, away from there physically, geographically, culturally, and in terms of time, we don't really see why 12 is so important. But this is what it says, that a boy the age of 12 years and one day his vows must be examined. The vows meaning the laws and rules found in the Torah. Those are the vows. And when you become of age, you vow that you will keep the laws of Torah. But at the age of 12, his vows must be examined. And a boy at the age of 13 and one day, his vows then become valid. So what they're saying is this, that when you're 12 years old, that's when you begin to take responsibility for keeping the vows, for keeping the Torah, and you need to begin to defend why you're going to keep those vows, why you're going to study them, and how you're going to practice them, and how you're going to live them out. And the Mishnah goes on to say that during that time frame, that for that year, that your vows are to be tested, you're to be questioned on the knowledge and your understanding of those vows. Like, are you hearing? This is what the Mishnah teaches, that at the age of 12 and one day to the age of 13 and one day, that's kind of the question period when they can challenge you on, oh, how are you going to keep those vows, or what does this vow mean? And look at what the scripture says in verse 47, chapter 2 again. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers, what? Of the vows, of the laws of the Torah. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding. They're saying, who is this boy? How does he have such a grasp on these vows already at 12 years old? And it's interesting that it says later in Luke chapter 2, verse 52, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor what? With God and with man. He grew with his wisdom. And so as they were tracking him and watching him, they began to see him just blossom in his understanding of the Torah. What's kind of neat is, remember what I said, that Luke likes to set it up and then he comes back to it later on. He does this again here too. So in Luke chapter 2, he sets up the story that at the age of 12 and a day to 13 and a day, that's the testing period. That's when you're supposed to be questioned by people about the vows, the laws of Torah. So then we fast forward to Luke chapter 20, verses 1 and 2, and this is what it says there, that one day as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests, so check out who was there, the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders, they came up to him. And if you don't know the background to this, like all that stuff I told you about the boy being questioned at 12 and keeping the vows and how Luke sets this all up earlier in his life, if you don't understand any of that, you kind of miss almost the comedy and the oof of this whole story. Because these leaders, these teachers, these respected rabbis, they all come up to Jesus after hearing his explosive teaching. They're like, who is this guy? And how does he teach with such authority? And I love what they say to him. Tell us by what authority you do these things. And who is it that gave you this authority? And he said, you did it years ago in this very place. Man, you talk about one of those boom, drop the mic moments and go. But this all comes to life here. Let me stop sharing this. This all comes to life when we understand the background, when we know the background. And this is what I'm hoping to bring to this new book that I'm in the process of writing. I know that understanding Jesus really helps you to understand him. And that was like the foundation, the ground level of teaching. And I'm hoping that now this next chapter, this next installment in this understanding series is going to take your understanding of the gospel and of Jesus and his teaching to a whole new level. Well, that's it. That's just a little tidbit for now. And maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll come back and give you another one and then another one, and just to kind of string you along and let you know what it is that I'm writing and the direction that I'm taking it in. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you back here real soon.